Hi, I am Clarenda, Farmer C, Stanley. I am a mother. I am a global fundraiser. I'm an environmentalist. I am a farmer.
You're listening to the Curious About Cannabis podcast. Hey, everybody, this is Jason Wilson with the Curious About Cannabis podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in once again. So today I am delighted to be joined with Farmer C, or C. Stanley, out of North Carolina. She's a hemp farmer, entrepreneur, many things. And we've got lots and lots to talk about today. Thanks so much, C, for being willing to come on the podcast.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes it so that now I won't feel like I'm cyber stalking you. You know, we have a genuine connection now. So, yeah.
Likewise. Yeah. Ever since I discovered your brand and your mission, which we'll get into all the specifics, and your product, there's so many things about what you're doing that resonate with me. One, you're trying to build not just a farm, but a learning laboratory, a learning center to learn about medicinal plants and agriculture and all these things. So that ticks one box for me. I'm very, very interested in that as a science educator and that sort of thing. Then two, your product, you have a tea that is a combination of two of my favorite plants, which is cannabis and Tulsi basil. So right away, we check all those boxes, and you're in the South, which for me, having come from the South too, finding sort of a kindred spirit like this, that of like your mission, what you're trying to do, the product that you've put out there, and the way you carry yourself and present your message to the world, I'm all in. So I'm stoked.
Well, thank you. And I've got to get you some tea. You've got to try it.
Yeah, I'd
I've got
love
to
to.
get you some Brenda's Balm.
Yeah, I'd love to. I've made my own sort of combinations like that before, just playing around in the kitchen.
Yeah.
But it's awesome to know that there's actually a product there on the shelves that people can go to. Now, I talk about Tulsi basil. It's come up in at least a third of my interviews. I end up talking about it just because of how powerful of a medicinal plant it can be, and just how good it tastes. And there
Yes.
are different varieties, but it tastes so good.
It's delicious. It really
Yeah.
is.
So before we get too far into all of that, let's backtrack a little bit and just share with folks that are listening. I've already spoiled a little bit, but what you're doing, what your mission is, and how you've gotten to where you are now, as well as where you're headed.
Oh my gosh. Well, if I tell you how I've gotten here, yeah, this will be a series, not just a one-time podcast. But I got here, Jason, the same way I think I have arrived at all my destinations in life. I take very creative paths. If someone
Mm-hmm.
says go right there, straight ahead, I am going to go right, then left, and I may even do a circle, right? I eventually get to where I'm going, but by the time I arrive, I pick up so many lessons along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, with the farm, I actually come from a farming background, only counting the voluntary
Yeah.
farming generations, but I would be considered fifth generation. So
Wow.
on my maternal side, they very much have followed an agrarian life. Even with my mother and her brothers, all college educated, which was a tremendous accomplishment for my grandparents, my grandmother, Charity, who I attribute a lot of my upbringing with her. She actually attended college, but they all moved back or found themselves back growing. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to have anything at all to deal with farming. I wasn't getting paid. There were all these creepy crawly things. It's hot. It's hot. I'm in Alabama, growing up
It's
where
hot.
it's really hot. Yes. So I hightailed it out of there. I graduated early at 17. I was a smart kid, but I also, was a product of divorce, eventually ended up living with my maternal grandparents. Um, wasn't one of those kids that, when the adults in my life saw that I was having a hard time, it was hey, maybe we need to give her some therapy or some counseling or some
Mhm.
emotional support. You know, old school. We're gonna
Yep.
try to whip you into what we need for you to be. And that did not quite work with me. I will use one of the kinder adjectives that I was called young at a young age, and that was I was headstrong, but I was
Mhm.
smart. So I usually could get out of most whoopings, but not all of them. So I left. I took off and went to college and never really thought about becoming a farmer per se.
Mhm.
I've always been attracted to growing. I've always had an amateur interest in medicinal plants, had some recollection of knowledge that my grandmother shared with me and my mom shared with me. But of course, that wasn't my thing. So I wasn't necessarily trying to retain all of that knowledge. But some had definitely stuck with me. And so I had a little bit of a green thumb, but you know, if I had to pick up and move, I was a military spouse for a while. If
Mhm.
I had to leave the plants, I wasn't heartbroken over it. Now, today, you know, totally different. But so I left, start living life, you know, working on becoming an adult, making those wonderful mistakes that if you can live through them, you've got a
Mhm.
great story to tell and hopefully some wisdom to go along with it. And had what you know, for a while, I was trying to find myself professionally, spent some time being a teacher. I've been a mental health
Mm.
clinician, actually. And eventually graduated, got a degree in marketing. Oh, and by the way, Jason, I left out a couple of little details. I was also a two-time teenage mom. So I'm figuring all of
Oh,
this out, and I've got two
wow.
little ones that, you know,
Wow.
you have to provide some stability
Mhm.
for because apparently if you don't they go haywire. So working on figuring all of that out and ended up going into marketing and eventually ended up becoming a fundraiser. Had no
Mm.
intention of becoming a fundraiser. I just saw that the fundraiser, I was working at a college, the fundraiser looked to really be having a good time. She was
Mhm.
going out to lunch when I was asking, so who did you have a meeting with? Oh, I had a meeting with this extremely wealthy person. What are you meeting about? Oh, well, they're telling me how they want the money that they're giving us to be disseminated. So, so wait a minute. Let me
Yeah.
understand this. While I'm stuck in this office toiling, writing all of these great proposals for you, you're going to have lunch with extremely wealthy people, coming back to the office complaining some days that you've had to have lunch twice. And and you get paid a lot more than I get paid, and you're talking to people who want to give money. Sign me up for this. So I go into fundraising. Hell, I mean, I'm like, if you can do it, I
Yeah.
can do it. I go into
Yep.
fundraising, eventually work my way on up, and now work for a large environmental organization. Now, everything has worked out. I've checked the boxes. Okay, got married and then didn't work out, got married again. Ugh, not very successful at this marriage thing, but career is popping. Kids are crack free, you know, academically gifted. They brush their teeth most nights. Did okay
Yes.
there. I've got 3 dogs. We have a house in the suburbs. I've got decent credit. Like things are fine. Why in the hell would I become a farmer? And, you know, that is a question. So, during that last unsuccessful marriage, there was a point that he was going through a career transition. And
Mhm.
I basically said to him, Jason, what do you want to do? He was like,
Mhm.
I would love to grow hemp. It had just became legal here in North Carolina. I'm like, fine. I go and buy a farm because I want it to be known that if I have to leave you, I really tried everything. You want a
Mhm.
farm? Here's a farm. Go farm. Well, obviously, that
Uh-oh.
didn't work. So now I have this farm. And it's like, what the heck am I supposed to do with it? Now, also during this time, because of the novelty of me in the industry, being a Black woman with a hemp license, because I'm the one who got the license,
Hmm.
all of a sudden, there's a lot of attention. Hemp
Yeah.
has now, you know, the big
Oh
short-lived
yeah.
golden era where people were just spewing all kind of lies, and it was going to save the South. All of these tobacco farmers, everybody, all you need to do is you're going to put this little magic seed in the ground. It needs a little water, a little sun. We have it. It's pest resistant. The deer don't like it. Lies.
Right.
um, it's going to grow up 12 feet tall, and you'll make 80,000 easy per acre. So of course everybody rushes and signs up, and a few of those who were aware noticed that it was a very homogenous group of individuals for the most part,
Hmm.
especially when we look at the racial profile. And so it was a very white male movement.
Hmm.
And then if you had a little diversity, it tended to be gender, so it would be a white woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
So me being Black, and a woman, it's like, hey, 2019 featured farmer for Hemp History Week. Have at
Yeah.
it. It's like, okay, great coverage. Then all of a sudden, we're on the AP. We're on the cover of
Mm.
all these newspapers for the AP, the groundbreaking article they did right after Trump signed the Farm Bill. And so we're all over the place. Now, going into it, I always gravitated more towards the business side. That's where my skill set is. So I was behind the branding, the marketing, making sure that we were capitalizing and optimizing all of these opportunities. And my former partner was production. He was the one who was actually all about growing. I knew enough about growing to have a conversation with someone who did not know how to grow and
Hmm.
impress them. I could impress someone brand new. Now, if I got into a conversation with one of these old heads who have been around for a while, then, very soon they would know that she's like a kid who went to a 4-year school as opposed to one who goes to a 2-year. A
Mm.
2-year technical education, you're going to be able to hit the ground running. They teach you how to actually do it.
Do. Yeah.
Whereas with the 4 year, it's more theoretical, right? And then
Hmm.
you get this highly educated kid that you have to tell them how to
With no
go from point
skills.
A to point B. Exactly,
Yeah.
no practical knowledge. And so it was working until it didn't work. And now I have this farm, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Um, I briefly thought about selling it. That was very brief, because one lesson that had been instilled in me by my grandparents and by my mother in particular was the importance of land ownership, and
Hmm.
specifically the importance of land ownership in the Black community. So when you look at the numbers, farmland, of course, we know that small farmers make up the majority, like what, 80% of the number of producers, even though they only get a small percentage of actual commodity sales.
Right.
When you look at ownership, 96% of all privately owned farmland is owned by whites. So that leaves
Wow.
4%. So for
Hmm.
me to not keep it was like, well, I have to keep it.
Hmm.
And so I'm standing there, I'm like, okay, we've got this farm. I've got a well at least. Let me grow some stuff. Well, apparently, it's not a magic seed. There's a lot that goes into it, as I have come to know this beautiful cannabis plant. I really have so much respect for the
Hmm.
plant, and being on the medicinal side for my ladies, who really communicate and let you know how they're feeling. So there was that piece. Being an environmentalist, I knew that a monoculture wasn't going to work,
Yeah. Yeah.
and having access to so much information in the regenerative space, in the organic space. And I consider us to grow with ecological consciousness. That is the term
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
use, as opposed to putting it in some package because there's so
Sustainable or
much.
regenerative or whatever.
And then
Yeah.
the regenerative folks are arguing with the organic people. And I'm like, you
I
can't
know.
even agree on how to grow a plant without damaging the earth. Like, we argue over everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I really had this moment of introspection and reflection, and had to do some dissection of some of my thoughts, and um, some of the biases that I came
Hmm.
to it with, because I personally had never thought of farming as this glamorized profession. You know, here I am now,
Hmm.
I've overcome all these obstacles, I've got a couple of degrees, I've become, the first senior fundraiser at this large environmental organization, and I've got donors all over, and we've made it. And then to become a farmer. But now, totally, of course, I have wisened up. Again, there's a lot that I didn't know coming into this, and so I know now that farmers are some of the most brilliant
Yeah.
individuals walking the face of this earth, and we're fortunate for us because I'm amongst them now. So yeah, I went through all of that and said, what would I like it to be? And having access to the data, knowing the inequities that exist,
Hmm.
knowing the the systemic issues that we're facing as a society, and within the society, groups of individuals who have continued to be marginalized and oppressed. So how can I use this fertile platform
Hmm.
to grow something bigger than what I initially thought we were going to be, which was, we're going to be this, always want to be boutique, but we're going to be this boutique hemp farm, and make $80,000 an acre. And now it has really evolved and grown up. My dream grew up, and now it's a mission. So I'm so excited. We want to create a teaching farm. So, in addition to producing our products, we will actually have the ability to bring underrepresented farmers. And my special focus is not exclusive. I've had some people like, oh, you only want to have Black women. I'm like, and if I did, and is that a
Right.
terrible thing? I mean, let's go back to research if you really, really wanted to get out of this. But it's not exclusive. But I do have a focus on Black women, women of color,
Hmm.
who want to learn not necessarily always how to be a farmer, but maybe you want to learn how to grow. Maybe you want
Hmm.
to expand your knowledge of plant medicine. Um, Maybe you're interested in homesteading, or,
Hmm.
just to be able to make sure that the knowledge is broader. And for those who do want to become farmers, to teach them some of the things I've learned if you don't want to be a struggle farmer. Because
Hmm.
everywhere I go, I see struggle farming.
Hmm.
And that to me is about as terrible as the fact that we have teachers on welfare and people
Hmm.
get paid millions of dollars to bounce a rubber sphere up and down a court and put it through a hoop. Like, work with me, people. But yeah, that's what we're all about. So the name Green Heffa comes from my grandmother. It's
Hmm.
honoring her favorite insult. If someone really ticked her off, they were a mean heifer, an old mean
Oh,
heifer. And
okay.
so that's where green heifer comes from.
Wow. There's so many things to dive into from all of that. That's so fascinating. I mean, one of the things that you brought up that really sticks in my mind is your mission of trying to figure out, because we're sort of in a race against time here as far as trying to ensure that people that want to own land, get involved in farming, all this sort of stuff, that they do it. Because, as you know, as a farmer, and as an environmentalist, like getting exposed to all this information, the land grab by the major corporations that run big agriculture,
Yeah.
the ability to even be a small farmer. much less a woman farmer and a black woman farmer. You know, it's like the
Yeah.
complications increase
Exactly.
every
Exactly.
level. But it is like a race against time to really empower people with this information, this knowledge, and to inspire, to get people to, you know, like you said about the bias of farming,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
help people overcome that if they have that in themselves. I know that growing up, I also dealt with that until I also got older, started thinking about things a little differently, and especially as I became a science educator and then an environmentally focused science educator, you just start thinking about land use differently. You start thinking about the
Yeah.
way humans are organizing themselves differently, and
Exactly.
you realize how important it is to have these skills. Yeah, even if you don't want to be a farmer, just knowing how to work the land, how to garden, how to do some
How to
basic things.
manage your water,
Yeah, yeah,
just basic stuff. How to lower your energy bills,
yes,
those kind of things. Which when when we tie them to some type of economic outcome for a
hmm,
lot of people, I think it would make it more palatable. But it's just like it's another thing to have to be like, oh, here's something else. And our
hmm,
planet is so big, and it's the sky has always been there, the ground has always been there. We have other problems, we're dealing with, I don't have dental insurance and my tooth hurts, or
hmm,
there's a pandemic going on, or I can't afford to stay at home because I was sick, I
hmm,
have to go to work because we depend
right,
on every check, or I'm concerned about my kid riding his bike because of the choice of clothes that he has on. It may make him to appear more suspicious. So we have
hmm,
all of those other things, and then you want to throw on us, well, you really need to be concerned about the entire planet, because the polar ice caps that you're never going to see because you don't have the money to travel, they're melting.
hmm,
So
right,
we might want to keep them frozen. Yeah, it's how do you
well,
make it real? And I hope Green Heifer Farms is able to do that, because one thing I am, you follow me, what you're experiencing now is what you experience when you engage with our
hmm,
company. We're very
yeah,
authentic. We're not this corporate brand, or we have no aspirations of being something that's no longer accessible to people.
hmm,
I want people to always feel okay with, hey, see, what's up? Hey, even if I don't have
yeah,
the capacity to respond to
right, yeah,
everyone, I want there to be that energy, that vibe.
yeah, absolutely. And it, you know, one hope I have with the pandemic that's going on is, hopefully, although I don't hear much discussion in a lot of media about it, but hopefully there starts to be discussion about our food supply chains and how our communities are dependent on so many different things, and that
Mhm.
there's really an opportunity here for people to think critically and possibly restructure some things, invest in local farms, local food supplies, try to eliminate some of those middlemen. And by the way, a lot of times when you do that, your food's usually more nutritious. Oh, and it's usually better for the earth. You know, all these other things that stack on top. But as far as bringing it home so that people like are directly impacted and are, you know, inspired to do something, maybe, you know, as we have seen some of the food supply disruptions that have happened, and I think there'll be more because, you know, there are going to be outbreaks that continue to happen around the world for a while, for the foreseeable future. And so there's going to be little hiccups for a long time. And hopefully it drives that conversation. Where does my food come
Yeah.
from? And why is it so hard to stock, you know, this or,
Yeah, I think I definitely see some conversations taking place that would would make it seem that there is a greater awareness.
hmm,
But and so there is, those who are going to get it are going to get it, as with
hmm,
any major event,
yeah,
especially a global one. But it takes a certain amount of capacity to even ask those questions. To
Mm-hmm.
be able to ask where my food is coming from, you have to know that you're going to have some food. You have to
Mm-hmm.
know that, you have something in your refrigerator, the means to get it. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't have that kind of capacity, then you're probably not going to be able to ask those type of questions because you're exhausted.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
you know, Being a former two-time teenage mom, there was a period that I was on public assistance. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were some days I did not eat because I had my oldest daughter had a particularly robust appetite. So, you know, going back for seconds for her was not a rarity. That was
Mm-hmm.
a daily occurrence.
Expected.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so, I honestly didn't even think about going to get some seeds and maybe planting something in the garden because
Mm-hmm.
who has time for that?
Yeah.
Working these menial, these just disrespectful paying jobs,
Mm-hmm.
trying to make it through the month because you have more month than money. You're not sitting around. A lot of people aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those who say, hey, for me, I realize I've got to go back to school and I've got to get my education. That's pretty much the only thing that's really going to give us a fighting chance. But I had a lot of people and that I associated with that when I had that same conversation, like, hey, let's go back to school, they didn't have the energy. I don't think
Yeah.
people realize how genius of a system design oppression really is. Like
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
detail was thought out. You can literally just not have the will. And so
Mm-hmm.
for many people, and we see that happening because we see people getting elected. We
Mm-hmm.
see
Yeah. Yeah.
still see arguments over things such as the color of one's skin. Like, are you serious? Gender and all of this other stuff. So there are going to be a few people who are going to have that very conversation, that awareness, that light bulb. But there unfortunately are going to be many who aren't going to
Mm-hmm.
reach that point. And I consider myself an optimist. I know I don't sound very optimistic, but just from my observation, unless something, we have to see aliens or something, I think, before
Yeah. Yep.
something
It's
big happens. It's like, oh,
that's
we
that's
we
pretty
need to
much how
care
I
about all of
feel.
us.
I know. Yeah, it's like what's gonna break us out of the little camp, little tribe mentality, and just think about everyone as a whole. And you're right. The systems of oppression are so very intricate and you know fascinating on an intellectual level and terrible on a practical level. But you're right that there's so many people alive right now that are in survival mode that are just struggling to get to the end of the day and ensure that they're going to make it to the next day, or
Exactly.
they're caring for so many other people. Yeah, that not everyone has the luxury to try to really get into these things. And it's an interesting kind of privilege
It
that you
is. It
bring
is.
up. Yeah, it's a really
It
interesting
is.
kind of privilege that we don't really account for very much. And it's really easy to sit back in our armchairs and say, why aren't other people just, why don't they get it? Why don't they just do what they need to do and make things better? And
I mean, we've given them the bootstraps. Why aren't they pulling
right,
themselves
right,
up?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Why aren't they just
Well,
figuring it out?
because you gave us bootstraps, but you actually gave us a loan for them. We have to
Right.
pay you that back with interest. You own the cows, you own the cobbler, you own the pastures. So we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and go where?
Oh, and, and
It's
and the bootstraps are broken, by the way.
they're broken. So no, I'm
Yeah.
not sitting there looking at them like, is this vegan leather or you know?
Yeah, well, and it's something that particularly activists that are very passionate about making change. It's something that I think it's very, very important for them to um, understand, because we were talking before we started the podcast that
Mhm.
we're both from the South. grew up in rural, poor areas and stuff, and so our perspective is different than
Hmm.
maybe a lot of people. And when I moved to Oregon, um, I'm still wrestling with this issue that it's just so clear that a lot of people do not understand the struggles of people that are really poor. There are some people that think they're poor, but like really, if you were to compare, it's apples and oranges, and they don't
It is.
understand the communities and the history and all of the not just decades, but hundreds of years that have led to the way that a lot of these communities are set up. I mean, like out here on the West Coast, some of these towns and cities are not that old. Like there's still
Yeah.
so much area out here that's um, not even founded into organized towns. Whereas
Yeah.
in the South, like people have been there for quite a while, and
Generations.
exactly generations.
And when you take into
And
consideration, when you expand it, right, in a global context, and
yeah.
know that our our poor, it would be considered wealth, or if not
Hmm.
wealth, a step above current living conditions in so many places in the world. I had the opportunity to go to Kenya in 2018, and I went to Kibera. I think it's pronounced Kibera, and that's the area that's very very poor. And
Hmm.
there was a man that was boiling plastic in order to cook some bushmeat to to feed his children. Burning plastic.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Oh my goodness. That
Oh,
hurts
I
my heart.
cried. I
Yeah.
cried.
Yeah.
I cried. I did, and I know my tears provided him no comfort.
Yeah.
Absolutely none. And I'll admit, I was. What do you do? You know,
Right.
I actually and I don't know if I've ever said this, but I had some money on me. I was told don't go there because I was by myself. And then I was
Hmm.
told don't show any money. But I just
Hmm.
refused to believe that I could. And I'm like, look, I'm coming from America. I walk
Yeah.
around scared every day. You're not gonna tell me
Yeah.
that I cannot even
Yeah.
walk around in Africa like really? So
Yeah.
I'm walking the streets. As long as I didn't say anything, I had to, take some things off because there were certain things that still
Right.
were symbols of wealth. And I did give
Yeah.
him some money, and there were other people who saw the money, and I don't even know how much it was, shillings. I mean, it was some ridiculous
Hmm.
um, rate, the shilling to the dollar. I think one
Right.
of their dollars is worth a penny here, something ridiculous.
Oh,
So I just gave them all of it. I don't know. It was about $30 in
hmm.
US dollars. And that gave me absolutely no relief because I
Hmm.
know that you're still going to have to figure out
Yeah.
how to sustain. And unless you continuously have someone investing in you, paying for your kids to go to school,
Yeah.
then what? Like
Yeah.
what's the outcome? So yeah, I'm sorry. I took you off track. You was going somewhere there, Jason. My bad.
No. No. This is all so important to talk about, and we'll always loop back around because I mean, um, you know, a couple other things I wanted to get into based on what you've already said, and then we'll press forward into other things. I mean, one thing I wanted to ask you, talking about um, the your background and the generations in your family that have been farmers, and then talking about the history of areas where we grew up and everything. Do you, when you farm, do you now feel very connected to your ancestors in that work, knowing that they also were putting that time, the blood, sweat, and tears, all that energy in, and taking care of their families, making all this, pressing forward. How does that feel when you're working in the
Oh,
in the farm and thinking about
absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. My ancestors are with me. Every day that I'm out there, I mean, literally feel their energy. And I know that they are extremely proud because I wasn't forced to do this.
Yeah,
This
you
was a
chose.
choice for me.
Mhm.
And, the thing about here in America that we sometimes forget, is that Black history didn't start with slavery. It was
Yeah.
interrupted. That was a major interruption, and colonization and all of that. It was an interruption. So we come from the land.
Hmm.
Women like me are the ones who stayed at home and gathered and figured out how to grow so that we could be
Hmm.
more efficient and effective with our time because we had so many other things to do, like keeping the kid from, jumping in the fire or something. So
Yeah.
growing is a spiritual experience for me.
Hmm.
I don't belong to any organized religion, but every time I step on that farm, it's church, because
Hmm.
I can see how the land is responding. Uh, I'm able to listen better to
Mm,
the
yeah.
plants as opposed to telling them, oh, well, this is what you need. I've learned to understand how they communicate. Yeah, so, and I feel my mother there. I know my grandmother. My grandfather is especially proud of me. He was disappointed I got a Chevy. I felt it in my spirit because there is no truck but Ford, but I did redeem myself and get a John Deere tractor.
There you go.
So he is with me every single day. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And along this journey of, deciding that you're going to keep this farm and you're going to build it and everything, what were some of the hardest lessons that you had to learn early on, that now you look back and, are very appreciative of?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely still a good old boy
Sure. Yeah.
space. And I've had a few experiences where there was no sugarcoating, that my presence wasn't appreciated in that
Oh,
space.
wow.
um,
Yeah.
so that issues with going to a credit union that was designed specifically for farmers with the 800 plus credit score and 25% down, and being told that, oh yeah, we can't approve your
Oh, my
mortgage,
goodness.
and
Oh, my
having
goodness.
to take that to the highest level
Jeez.
in order that all of a sudden, oh, surprise, we can. And, knowing that to get into farming now, if you don't have certain capacity,
Hmm.
you are going to be in debt up to your eyeballs. Your kids are going to be in debt. So many of these farmers, especially small farmers, a lot of people who got into hemp got in bed with some investors or went and
Hmm.
got
Yeah.
all of these loans. And now that $80,000 per acre, oh,
Yeah.
they may have exaggerated a tad whole lot.
A tad.
Um, so, and then the learning curve.
Hmm.
In addition to learning, it's one thing to know how to grow, it's another to know how to farm.
Yeah.
And I never really had respect for the size of an acre until I had to bush hog one in
Hmm.
90 degrees North Carolina sun. It's like, how big is this thing? Oh, well, you've got, another 14 to go. Um, so just that learning curve and figuring out, making mistakes, sometimes mistakes that have cost me, and still having the fortitude to keep going at it,
Hmm.
and not just being able to focus on production, because
Yeah.
you can't just focus on production.
Yep.
You've got to spend just as much time on the business aspects.
Hmm.
I've got to be doing branding and marketing, and somehow I gave birth to three social media adverse kids, and
Oh, no.
to the point I'm guilting my son. I'm just almost 17. Every 17-year-old has a Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat kid, but none of my children like social media. So if
Wow.
anybody is listening to this and they're like, oh, she's just always on there, there's no one else to show you. Okay. When I can get them on camera, I do. All of those different pieces that are part of farming now, and
Hmm.
the laws, oh my gosh, especially if you're in the cannabis space. I'm growing
Yeah.
hemp. You can smoke a joint the size of a telephone pole. The only thing it's going to help with maybe is helping you vote correctly in November, since you obviously need some help with that. But, you know,
Oh.
I wish it did. I wish what I grew could get you high. I really do, because I think cannabis is a beautiful plant regardless, but it's
Mhm.
not. But you still have all that conversation. My dad hasn't even tried my tea yet.
Really? Just
Retired
out of
military officer, deacon in the church. Just, he's old
just because
school.
of
He was
stigma?
he was taught. He's from that
Mhm.
old school, that old guard that was taught that, cannabis, hemp, marijuana, whatever you refer to it as, was, say no to drugs. So
Mhm.
that's his mindset. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. Well, and that ties into one of the big things I want to talk to you about, which is stigma. So this concept of stigma, there's obviously it's a very multi-dimensional issue, but it's something I wanted to get your perspective on the
Yeah.
different types of stigma that you've had to deal with through this journey. Because I mean, obviously there's multiple levels. I mean, there's the cannabis side, but you're also a Black woman farmer in the South. So, I
Yes.
mean, there's got to be, that's like you said, there's a certain level of mental fortitude one has to
Yeah.
have to really take that on. So, can you speak to that a little bit or a
Yeah,
lot of
and
it?
all of those things you just mentioned have helped me to deal with stigma, because you have all of that, at a time I was on public assistance, there was a time I was a college dropout, there was a time, I was well, not teenage mom now, but I was a teenage mom, and just that stigma attached to that, stigma
Yeah.
attached to so many things, being divorced, or having more
Yeah.
than one father for your children. Oh my God, that's so terrible. All of these things. So by the time it got to cannabis, I'm like, what?
We've been around this stigma issue
We've
for a
been
while.
around. I honestly could care less about what you think. I mean, I try to educate and inform if the
Mhm.
environment is receptive to that. I don't try
Yeah.
to push my knowledge or beliefs or ideologies on anyone in any circumstance, because you don't get anywhere.
Mhm.
If it's a environment that's receptive to information, I try to educate and say that hemp rope that you have, you have hemp
Mhm.
in your home. You've been using hemp, but we've just been real stupid,
Mhm.
because we outlawed something that we still had a tremendous need for. So we decided we're going to buy it from them over there. And we, sent our money out to go buy
Mhm.
the hemp, because we didn't want you to lose your mind and go crazy due to this terrible plant. And the sad thing is, not the sad thing, I would say ironic. When I talk to people and I
Mhm.
start talking about all these other plants that are out in their backyard, like, you could get real high off of this.
Mhm.
THC has nothing on this, and
Right.
it's in your backyard. Like, what? Don't
Yep.
don't feed into the hype. But yeah, I haven't really cared about stigma. I have a coworker who, she and her husband actually own a pretty successful um, THC cannabis dispensary, and no one knows.
Hmm.
And she's like, I
Wow.
don't want to tell anybody. I'm like, why? It's legal in your
Why? Yeah.
state. Well, the stigma. And she was
Mhm.
so surprised that I've been so open
Mhm.
um, about my farm and my products. I, I look at my colleagues like, if in the event that you need some tea, I would rather your money stay in the family. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah, I don't deal. It's just so many other things I think that I've been stigmatized about, that
Mhm.
the cannabis, and I don't differentiate between hemp and any other type of cannabis, because you have that
Mhm.
movement too.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, what's the sign I see? Don't cry, it can get you high. Like, just dumb stuff. It's what, you know. hemp, if you're growing for cannabidiol, it's not psychoactive. Yes, it is
It
psychoactive. You,
definitely is.
you you
Yeah.
you just don't get what you define as high. But why would people be taking it if it wasn't psychoactive? You were
Yeah.
stressed. You happen to feel a little more calm. That's a little
Right.
psychoactivity happening. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So in
that's
short, I don't care about the stigma. So it's not something I've really dealt with because, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn about the stigma attached to
yeah. Well, I
to
mean,
cannabis.
that's a great attitude to have, for sure. I mean, it's something that I've struggled with myself, just like being an educator and a scientist, and then um, sort of like privately doing this work with cannabis on the side that people didn't know
Mm-hmm.
about, and then eventually this time came where it's like, well, I mean, I'm in a state where it's legal. What I'm doing is, it's not like I'm working in the black market, doing stuff like this, and it's interesting work and it's stuff that needs to be talked about. And so finally,
Yes.
you know putting my personal self, my personal name, everything out there, and saying like, hey,
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing. And I mean, it was scary, in a sense, because there's always that feeling of like, what if my colleagues don't take my work seriously anymore? There's all these
Mm-hmm.
ideas, and then there's some point that you have to get to where um, you care more about what you're doing for yourself and what your mission is and your path is and everything, then you care about what anyone else is going to have to say about that. And trust, there's a lot of kind of faith in that too, just
Mm-hmm.
going with it and trusting that things can be all right.
Yes.
You might get
Yes.
some flack. They're going to be haters. They're going to be people that are going to have everything negative they can to say about what you're doing, but there's
Yeah.
also plenty of people that resonate with what you're doing too, and you just have to trust.
Plenty of people and haters typically, at least, and I don't even like calling them my haters because
Yeah.
that gives them a name, it gives a name. But I
Right.
have found from personal experience that people that fit that categorization are typically either jealous because you're doing
Hmm.
something either they would want to do, or just the fact that you broke free and are following a
Yes. Yes.
passion
I think
and,
that's a big one.
yeah, doing something that you really care about, and they may not, maybe they didn't take a
Hmm.
chance like that in their life. And so they're going to project that onto you. And then the other group are people who are just scared because
Hmm.
you're shaking things up. This isn't what I was taught. This isn't how I grew up. And now you're, telling me I have to change my mind on
Hmm.
another something. So I find, yeah, that, and you can't win them all. Was it
Right.
Steve
Yep.
Jobs once said, if you want to make everyone happy, sell ice cream? And that wouldn't even work because some people are
Right.
lactose intolerant or
Yep.
whatever. And they're
That's
like,
right. Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it's something that it's taken me a long time to get comfortable with, of that
yeah,
feeling of like, you can't be friends with everybody, you can't please everybody. It's more important to focus on what it is you're really trying to do and do it than get
yeah,
caught up in all of that.
exactly.
Going back to something you said way back, talking about, um, you mentioned that one thing that a lot of people getting into hemp farming right now are struggling with is the money side, that
Hmm.
they're getting into bed with investors or taking on loans, not really understanding
Hmm.
kind of what they're getting into. Do you have any advice based on your own experiences and your experiences with like fundraising and working in
Hmm.
other sectors that are, kind of related? Do you have advice for people that are either just getting into hemp farming or farming in general, or are thinking about it, ways that maybe could potentially keep them from going down that path of intense debt?
Sure. And these are tips that I would give to a general group because, of course, there's
Hmm.
always exceptions.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
One of the key things I would say or advise anyone getting into this is, if you don't have any money, don't get into this. This is not something you
Hmm.
get into to get yourself out of a situation. You should already be in a stabilized financial position that one, you're able to bring something to the table, and two, you're able to keep the lights on, eat,
Mhm.
go about having a certain quality of life that if your crop, like the first year
Mhm.
crop at my farm, is hit by a hurricane,
Oh
or
my
if
gosh.
it's hit by, a disgruntled soon to be ex spouse, that you're able to still keep moving and not be in such of a financial stressful situation that everything is hinging on, growing or
Mhm.
your cannabis business. Like, don't bet the farm. um
Right.
I would also say for anyone that's coming into this, that if it looks too good to be true, oftentimes it isn't. Be careful when you're signing these contracts and getting into bed with some of the players in this space, especially like for growers.
Mhm.
Have access to a legal eye that
Mhm.
can look over and make sure that you are not getting the short end of the stick. And that goes back to having resources, because
Yeah.
you need someone to set your business up correctly. This isn't unregulated industry by any means. And
Mhm.
so making sure that you invest the time and energy to do all that background, not as sexy work, like making sure you
Mhm.
have the proper business structure, making sure you've got the taxes worked out, making sure that you've taken advantage of your local, statewide, and any type of federal um, benefits that can
Mhm.
come to farmers, whether it's getting your farm number, or applying for present use tax value, whatever it's called, the one that you don't have to pay all that money in taxes. I did not know about that one. Still a little mad about
Mm.
that. And some of these other things that can benefit your farm. Don't think that you're just going to apply for a grant from the government and they're going to help you
Mhm.
start your farm. No, the government does not help you buy land. That's not
Mhm.
what they do. There are grants out there for farmers if you have a certain capacity.
Mhm.
They are looking for things that are going to benefit society as a whole. And so, if you have a mindset that you're going to come in and there's going to be all these federal dollars coming your way because you know of all these subsidies, etc., the bulk of those subsidies, the bulk of the cost assistance ship programs, the grants that are available are going to big ag,
Mhm.
because they have scale. They can produce the
Mhm.
numbers that meet the measurable outcomes that Uncle Sam is
Mhm.
looking for.
Yeah.
Um, I will also say, if you think that you're gonna, be able to get into this and spend 5, 10 hours a week, it's a little side hustle, especially on the growing side,
Oh
then
gosh.
hunty, wake up from that dream, because that is not happening. I'm up early in the morning, and
Mhm.
my farm is 40 minutes away from my house. So I've got to get
Mm.
up early and get
Mhm.
down there. And, sometimes I'm on the farm. Fortunately, I work from home for my job, which makes life easier so I can be anywhere. But, it's time intensive. It takes a lot of resources. Really research whether you want to do sun grown or if
Mhm.
you're trying to do an indoor grow. And hopefully think about your environmental impact and understand that this is, speaking from the natural resource side, this is
Mhm.
an intensive crop. You got to have some water, you've got to
Yeah.
have lights if you're trying to do medicinal indoor grows, etc. So, keep that in mind, and don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yep.
Right now at Green Heffa Farms, the fact that we are growing other medicinal plants, it allows us to be able to be more agile in this
Mhm.
space. And last thing I would say is just think outside of the box. I see them now. It's on the struggle bus. This whole CBG
Oh
thing.
yeah.
It's just terrible, and they're just trying to like, oh, get some CBG rich seeds, which are probably the seeds you got last year. But people keep trying to figure out another way to
Mhm.
monetize the benefits of the plant. And that's just part of being in a capitalistic environment. But don't put all your eggs in a basket. It's going to stress your soil in the first place, so that's not good. Secondly, it reduces your agility when things happen in the market. And third um third it's just it's not good business.
Right.
Even
No, it's not.
Coca-Cola has other products. It's
Exactly.
not you're really limiting your customer base. So those would be a few tips.
Yeah, and I've noticed that with your tea, you don't focus on CBD. Like you're not a hemp cultivator that's trying to hit the CBD market. You're
Yeah.
keeping it broad about the plant itself
Mhm.
and how it partners with other things, which I think is very, very smart. The CBD industry in general is very, it gives me a headache to think
It's
about.
grimy. It's
It it
grimy. I
it
didn't want to be
is
a part of that. It's I met some characters that it's distasteful. I'm like, I don't want to be a
hmm
part of that. I don't want to, because I don't have to do this. I don't want
yes,
to
yeah,
do something and then what I'm putting in the world isn't representative of my best self.
yep.
So a lot of time, effort, and thought went into it. And you won't see CBD in any of our marketing. And I've had people ask, what's the difference between your hemp flower and say smokable flower?
Mhm.
Mine
Nothing.
you're gonna put in a tea. That one you're gonna smoke.
Yeah.
Although a disarming amount of people who purchase my tea have come back and told me they have smoked it.
I'm not surprised. I mean,
They're
especially
smoking
with
my tea. Yeah.
the smell of that Tulsi basil and everything in there, it just has to call to them.
That's what they said. I didn't want to smoke it, but it made me, and it's a good smoke. Like, well, thank you. A lot of love went
Yeah.
into it.
Well, and how did you so a couple things that I want to ask you. One is how you settled on Tulsi Basil as your primary initial partner with cannabis for your tea, but then I also want to maybe use that as a segue just to talk about some of the other medicinal plants that you're interested in and that you're growing on the farm.
Okay, so I have to give credit here to our mutual acquaintance, Noelle.
Yeah, Noel.
She and I were both presenting at a conference, Organic Growers School. I think that's the name of it. But so we were both presenting. She was preparing some dishes using herbs and also showing how to make tinctures and
Mhm.
other products with herbs. And I was presenting on hemp. And we happened to be in the same Airbnb. They had us in the same Airbnb. And so when I initially arrived, she was already in bed and I saw all her herbs and everything. And, I was like, okay, I'm not going to touch anything. But later on, we actually met up in the kitchen. And so we're talking, and I'm talking about hemp, and I'm explaining to her, I'm like, I'm not going down the path that so many people who are growing. I'm not going to sell to a processor or a wholesaler. I don't want to do smokable. You know, I'm trying. I want to make teas. I want to blend it with
Mhm.
something. And she immediately said, well, have you thought about holy basil? And I had only before that referred to um, the herb as Tulsi. So
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
wasn't familiar with the holy basil term. And she was like, are you familiar with holy basil? No, I'm not. And she pulled out this bag, Jason, of this aromatic,
Oh yeah.
it was unbelievable. She opened it and I could smell the terpenes. And I'm like, this
Mhm.
is, what is this, some designer hemp or something? And she's like, no, this is holy basil. I'm like, wow. So then I was like, well, I'm sure there are countless holy basil hemp blends. I mean, it just makes sense, of
Yeah.
course. She breaks down the science, Noelle. That's
Oh, yeah.
my little horticultural nerd and herbal medicine guru. She knows everything. So she's breaking down all the different types and the similarities with hemp and how she thinks that the terpene profile would be compatible and, the adaptogen, genic value and blah, 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 blah. So she's saying all of this. And all I'm thinking is, man, this smells so good. I actually wanted to smoke it, but I didn't then. I I
Then.
made some tea. Yeah. Well, I mean, I did have to smoke it. I mean, it was begging to be smoked. It literally jumped into my pipe. Um,
Exactly.
so I made a tea, and I'm like, this is delicious. And that is so Noelle gets I might need to give her, well, I'll wait till I get super rich. I'll give her some stock or
There you
something.
go.
She deserves a few, she deserves it. No, but that's my girl. So yeah, that's how it happened. And I just fell in love and started studying. And I mentioned earlier that I grew up and my mother, particularly my grandmother, Charity, she dibble dabbled into plant medicine. They didn't call it
Mm.
plant
Mhm.
medicine. Some people would call it roots, but they
Mhm.
would get plants and do things. I know when I injured myself, because I was always injuring myself, I played hard. And so
Mm.
I come home with some type of laceration or something, and she would get this little rusty tin. I remember it being rusty because I remember being concerned that I just got stuck with some rusty
Right.
metal. And you're going to get that rusty tin, but she would get this little concoction that either she had made or some other elder in the community made. And, all she called it was salve. That was it.
Mm. Mhm. It's the
And
mysterious,
some mysterious, yeah, and it was something. I don't know. But so we had that. My grandfather would take me out sometimes and teach me different plants. You can eat this, you can't eat
mm.
that, don't touch this, don't touch that. So I had went through a little phase in the 90s dating myself, where at the time I had locks in my hair and I wanted to make natural hair products. And so I started
Mm.
studying and I bought all these books on herbalism and aromatherapy and um, just dibble dabbled and start making stuff, and actually had developed a little customer base that wanted those hair products, but then got distracted and just stopped doing it or whatever. But that interest and passion never died. It would find itself in other places. Like I raise
Mhm.
orchids. I have 17 right
Oh,
now.
cool. Wow.
Love orchids, love them.
Yeah.
And so other little projects. But now that I've come back full circle, it's, a tremendous, I'm very much a student because there's so many plants out
Yes.
there that do such beautiful things. And I think I read a report that said we're only using like 12% or something like that. I might be wrong on the percentage, but it's a low percent of
Mhm.
the plant world's medicinal capacity. Like we're just
Yeah, it's very,
using
very
that
small.
much. And that is mind blowing to me when you think
Mhm.
about all of the pharmaceutical drugs that are
Yep.
based on nature's design, right?
Yep.
So the first plants that made sense, I had to learn my land
Mhm.
because we weren't initially trying to get to know the land. We were going there telling it what it was going to do.
Mhm.
You're going to grow this plant for us, and we're going to make all of the amendments that we need to make to you for you to cooperate with what we have planned for you. So going back to it and saying, well, why don't you show me what you have? Oh, you have dandelions. Oh, you have crimson clover. Oh, you
Mhm.
have things that are here right now that are medicinal in value.
Yep.
And so with my tea, you can go buy some botanical blends. They'll give you 12, 13 herbs, you know, and I keep it very simple. One, out of respect for the mother, hemp is a pretty special plant. And
Yeah.
so um I don't see myself ever blending it with more than maybe two herbs, because
Yeah.
then
Hmm.
things can start becoming redundant. And I mean,
Hmm.
if you need three herbs that reduce anxiety, then no, what you need is, you don't need tea. You need a lifestyle makeover, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sip some tea on the way to the therapist. Like, come on. Let's
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Might need a little more work
might
than
need
what
a
some tea
little
can
more
provide.
work. And that's been
Yeah.
like one of my big issues with the CBD industry, all of these promises that are
Yes.
being
Yes.
made. No, keep eating your honey buns and drinking your cokes, and
Just make sure to
it's
take your
fine.
CBD.
Just take two dropperfuls for you under the tongue, hold it there for a while, and you know you'll be
Yeah.
fine.
It's it's been hard for me. Um, I don't I don't have a problem telling people news they don't necessarily want to hear as far as science goes. And
Yeah.
so I get hired occasionally by companies that want a scientific advisor. They think they want a
Okay.
scientific advisor, and and then they bring me in and they say, "All right, so we want to make some products, and we'd really like to use CBG or CBD. So what conditions can we formulate our products for?" And I'm like,
Exactly.
that data doesn't exist. And they're like, what do you mean? There's so much research and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, there's some preclinical research, and then there is some clinical research that is not on your product, but on, something totally different. Um, and when I start teasing out these nuances about medical conditions and medicinal plants and the chemistry and all this sort of stuff,
Uh-huh.
that's usually not what anyone wants to hear. They're like,
No,
no,
no.
just tell me I can make a sleep formula
Yep.
and get it out to people, and give me some papers I can cite that show that it's based in science. And
Exactly.
it's, yeah, it is. The CBD industry, the dietary supplement industry, a lot of this stuff, it doesn't sit super well with me because of all the promises. It's, to me, it's all tools, and we can figure out ways to use them, and they can be effective for some people in certain situations. But don't go around telling people you can predict what their experience is going to be like or what you're going to be able to do for them. When, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy.
I'm with you on that. And with our still being very much in the learning stage and understanding
Hmm.
endocannabinoid systems and how each person is unique and individual like a thumbprint. And
Yes. Yeah.
we honestly don't know a lot. We know a lot more than
Yes.
we knew, but we still don't know a lot. Yeah, so that definitely is something that I just try to stay away from that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
definitely do.
I think that's a smart strategy in the long term for sure. And to start to bring all this around,
Mhm.
because I don't want to keep you too long. We've already been going for like
Okay.
an hour and 15 minutes, which I really, really appreciate. You've been uh, really
Absolutely.
gracious with your time, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been really, really fascinating and fun.
We're
Um,
friends now, Jason. We'll talk again.
we are, yeah. And I mean, before the pandemic hit, I was planning on making a trip out to the South and visiting a few people that I hadn't been able to see in a long time. But whenever that's able to happen again, I'll try to make sure I can come by
Come
North
to North
Carolina. And
Kakalaki. I would
oh
love
yeah, yeah,
it. My
yeah.
farm is in this little town called Liberty. I think
Oh,
that's
okay.
just so befitting. Set the
Right?
people
Yeah,
minds free.
exactly. Yeah. Wow, you couldn't ask for a more perfect sort of
Really.
influence there. That's awesome. Well, in thinking about your place in the hemp industry, and one of the things that I've started to talk about more in some of my more recent interviews I haven't released yet, but this concept of social equity. How do we ensure? I mean, to give people context in case they've been living under a rock,
Mhm.
one of the consequences of the war on drugs is that um, the war on drugs is not a war that has been fair, and you have people of color that have been very disproportionately arrested, jailed, imprisoned, tacked with felonies, lose their ability to even vote, in some circumstances. And then if they get out of jail, the struggle to get funding if they want to start a business, get
Mhm.
financial aid if they want to go to school, get an apartment. There's so many things. And so one thing I want to really highlight is this um, really big problem the cannabis industry, as well as every industry, but the cannabis industry especially has with social equity. And what are your thoughts going forward on how we can ensure that people that have been the most disadvantaged by so much that's gone on around the cannabis plant in its prohibition and all of that stuff can hopefully have some sort of fighting chance to get into this industry and be involved, because I mean the cannabis industry is incredibly whitewashed and
Mhm.
male dominated,
Mhm.
just massively. I mean,
Mhm.
it is very significant. Go to any cannabis conference,
Oh
and
yeah.
you'll be hard pressed to see somebody who is not male or white.
Yes.
Um,
And
so
oftentimes, if you do
that's
see a person of color, they're more on the retail side, you know.
yes, yeah, yeah,
So still a customer. Yeah.
right, right, exactly, yeah. So I kind of want to end our conversation on this topic of how should people be thinking about this issue, and what are some ways we can try to push this forward and try to, I don't know, help things develop in a better way. Because once again, it is a race on time, because this industry is growing like crazy,
It
and there's a lot of
is.
money, a lot of big companies coming in. So,
Yeah.
what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on all that?
Well, I mean, you really hit the nail on the head when describing the industry itself. And no offense to you, Jason, but white men
Hmm.
just have not demonstrated that they have any interest in
Hmm.
relinquishing their share of any market that they dominate.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, when you ask what can the industry do when the industry is run by
Hmm.
white men, I don't know that the industry is going to do anything,
Yeah.
to be quite frank with you. So we recently were able to get a greenhouse on our farm, and this was in large part funded by a grant from Gaia Herbs that's here in
Hmm.
North Carolina. And they have a social justice grant where they give $5,000 to 4 or 5 organizations that are doing something in that space. It's farmers
Hmm.
justice. And so Green Heffa Farms received one of those grants. We need more people like that, more
Hmm.
more companies and corporate entities who are thinking like that, as opposed to what can I get out of it.
Yeah.
I've had investors, white male investors, approach me and feel that they're in some way being charitable, I guess, by saying,
Right.
hey,
Right.
even though I know Black women get some trivial amount of venture capital investment, I think it's like 0.2%. It's not, I don't
Something
even
like
think it's
that.
a whole percent.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even think we made it to one.
Wow.
I'm willing to invest in you, especially when that whole economic opportunity zone thing was, there was a lot of chatter
Hmm.
about that. We want to invest in you, help your cause, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And this is how much we're going to, willing to invest. This is the return on investment that we need. And, here's the equity that
Hmm.
we're requesting. And so I would ask them, wait now. So I'm telling you that this entity is more than just a business to me because of the fact that it increases the amount of acreage that's owned by
Hmm.
Black people in this country, with us
Yeah.
all understanding that all of this land was stolen by you.
Right.
But okay, some has fallen into my lap, and you want me to give you a portion of that equity in order to be able to advance the business. Now I'm
Hmm.
beholden to you.
Right.
That makes as much sense as charging Black folks money for student loans. So you
Hmm.
put everything in place to keep us behind the
Hmm.
curveball. If we manage to get into college and
Yep.
attend, you're going to put us in debt. So we still
Yep.
have to pay the piper. Like, come on. And, unfortunately, I don't see the industry as a whole doing much about it until consumers start
Yeah.
being
Hmm.
more vocal and more conscious of who they're purchasing their products from and
Hmm.
asking the players in this space these questions. What are you
Yep.
doing as far as social good? How are you using some of your profits to benefit? What are you doing to make sure your company is reflective of the
Hmm.
community? You've got big hemp farms out there. I know you are using labor that
Hmm.
is undocumented. I've trimmed a plant. I know
Yeah.
how much time it takes. Even if you have the machinery, we know you're
Yep.
doing this. What is the accountability that you're being held to make sure that the people who are on your farm are treated in a humane and just way?
Yep.
As consumers, have to start being more engaged and involved with where we're putting our money. And when we
Yep.
start doing that, that is when I think we will see a change happening in
Hmm.
this industry.
Yeah, and I mean, that whole point of the power of where you spend your money, that applies to so many things. But that was something that, I was going to say is my hope is that at least in maybe people hearing our conversation, maybe they will think differently about what they're buying and all of these
Yeah,
brands and the people behind them, and trying to, yeah, think critically of,
yeah,
if you're going to buy hemp products, like, where are they coming from? What, when you give somebody money, it's about more than just a dollar exchange. It's a power exchange, an energy exchange,
yes.
all of these different things. And
That's all
if we
money
can,
is.
exactly, that's what it is. Yeah. Yeah. And if we can really be mindful of those things,
Yeah.
then there can be some hope. But I unfortunately do agree with you that the industry as a whole, um, doesn't have any vested interest in changing.
Yeah.
Um, so it really does have to come from the consumers, and there are some nonprofit groups and things that are trying to
Hmm.
to help, but they're all drops in a bucket. That
Exactly.
um,
And we have to look at the older siblings, of the hemp industry, the agricultural industry as a
mhm.
whole. It looks very much like the hemp
Yeah.
industry looks, and
Yep.
the makeup of who owns dispensaries and retail outlets look very much like who owns, grocery stores and
Yep.
and
Yep.
outlets where you are able to purchase food, etc. So,
Yep.
and if the parents look the same, then the kid is gonna the kids are gonna look the same, hopefully, unless you need to ask some questions. But yeah, it's gonna take consumers really being more aware, and it's gonna take more people within the space saying something when they're in the room with their
Hmm.
industry counterparts.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
opportunity or platform I get, I speak. I mean, what am I going to lose? Most of my customer base, the majority of people who buy my products are Black women,
Hmm.
followed by white women. And a lot of them have come to me and said, I'm not really even interested. I don't drink tea, or I'm not necessarily interested in hemp per se. I wanted to support what you're trying to do. And
Hmm.
so, for people coming into it, I have one more tip actually for people coming into this. Don't just come into this for money.
Hmm.
You have to come in this with something bigger in mind than just money and build a business. Your business is reflective of your principles, I believe.
Yeah,
So,
I think so
whatever
too.
you have in place, and we have four guiding principles: environment, equity, education, and economic empowerment. So, definitely for people coming into this, create, Green Heffa Farms has to in no way be an anomaly. There can be
Hmm.
many farms that
Yeah.
are vested in their local communities, vested in the industry as a whole, and really being, you know, willing to say out loud, this is what we
Hmm.
stand for. And
Yeah.
so I think those two key groups can help create
Yeah.
some apply pressure.
Yeah, and I mean something that you're doing. So I encourage people to find Green Heffa Farms on social media and everything. And one thing that it seems like you're trying to do as part of your mission is sharing that journey, the lessons you're learning, and everything, so it can be a model for other people that feel
Yeah,
like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, if I want to get into this, how would I, all these different things. And you're like, look, you just choose to do it. If you have the passion, you move forward and you make it happen, and you're going to make
yeah.
mistakes, but you learn and you keep pressing forward, and then you never know where you'll be in a year or two, three. And so providing that model, I think that's something that's very very awesome about what you're doing, that you're not just cultivating hemp, providing a product, but there's a whole other value add in
Yeah.
your story and the all of the behind the scenes stuff that you're sharing, to really hopefully inspire other people to do the same. I agree that there's there's no abundance of these community farms that we need. We need so many more, and it's
Yeah.
important for people to see that in the model. Like you said,
Hmm.
the learning farm environment and all of that, and not just focusing on one plant, diversifying the ecological consciousness piece, all of that.
Hmm.
I think is really great. Hopefully, we do see it replicated.
I hope so. I think it's going to be rough the next few years.
Hmm.
I've read some studies that they estimate we're going to lose about a third of small farmers, that
Hmm.
they're not going to be able to sustain.
Yeah.
So it's really time for us to think about, who's going to who's after us, what's
Hmm.
after next. And so speaking out and really trying to help others and one understand how entailing farming is, and how it's not this, you know,
Hmm.
this this industry for uneducated country bumpkins, your wife is your cousin,
Yeah.
type. That's so far from what farming is today. The technology that's available, the soil science and botany and
Hmm.
horticulture and understanding swales and
Oh
xeriscaping,
yes,
and
yes, yes,
there's a lot.
yes. Yeah. I
There's
mean,
a lot that
especially
include.
especially if you're trying to take that ecologically minded
Yes.
route, where you're trying to think about how do we get the most out of our water, how are things moving through the property, how do we
Yes.
minimize the need for pest management, all of these different things. How I discovered Tulsi basil, and I promise I'll finish
Hmm.
after this, but
That's
how I
okay. I'm enjoying it.
good, yeah, how I discovered Tulsi basil was when I moved to Oregon and didn't know anybody here. I volunteered on a permaculture farm, and just to get outside and exposed to some sort of like quote unquote sustainable agriculture.
Hmm.
But I'm also not a fan of any of these terms, the buzzwords around all of that. But
How's
um,
ecological consciousness? How
I
did
like
that?
that. I like that a lot. I've actually used that term before too,
Okay.
because to me that just it's about your frame of mind, not a dogma.
Yes.
And so that's what's important to me. It's how are you approaching it, not are you studying what other people have said and you're just like, this is my bible and this is how we do things, and if other people do it differently, they're wrong. And somehow, I don't know, the arguments that happen among between the permaculture people, the regenerative people, the sustainable agriculture people, which seemingly supposedly have similar overlapping, if not the same goals. how they really go after each other. And then, like you said, the organic farmers. And yeah, anyway, but that's how I discovered Tulsi basil. Is I was involved in a harvest of it, and my clothes, the smell after harvesting Tulsi basil, I'd come home and it just smelled so good. And then eventually the farmer, let me take a bunch home, and that lasted me for like the bit he let me take home. I think lasted me for like 2.5 or 3 years. Just
Wow.
jar it all up and use it a little bit here and there.
Yes.
But that was my early exposure to it.
Have you
And
made any topicals or anything with it, or you
not
primarily
topicals,
ingest it? Okay.
just ingest it. Yeah,
Hmm.
I haven't played around with making my own topicals really at all. It's just something I haven't played with.
Well, I not really a topical. I mean, it was holy basil tea, but I had an allergic reaction to some hair color.
Hmm.
And I'm allergic to a particular chemical in permanent hair color, so I had
Gotcha.
purchased a natural one, and I thought
Hmm.
didn't have it, and I start having a reaction to it, and went into my book, and it said that Tulsi was often used with like conjunctivitis in the eyes
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
other things,
Yeah.
and that's where the my reaction was really
Reaction.
happening with
Yeah.
my eyes. And so I made a compress of holy basil tea and
Ah.
just really strong, and then placed the cloth across my eyes. And I kid you not, my eyes were still puffy. But before I did this, they were just bloodshot red. It looked like I had
Hmm.
had a lot of fun. And I put that compress on, and I mean, within 15 minutes there was a noticeable change, and then
Yeah.
just continue to do it, and the next day you wouldn't
Wow.
have noticed. Yeah.
I'll have to remember that. That's cool. Yeah, just
Yeah, eye
soaking a rag.
washes. Yeah, well, they
Yeah.
would use it for eye washes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. I didn't realize that. That's super
Yeah,
neat.
this has a lot of that's a whole nother podcast if
It
we were to
really
talk
is.
about
Yeah.
all the benefits of holy basil tulsi. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been super awesome. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to seeing how the farm grows, and potentially in a year or so, see where you're at. We might have to catch up again and touch base and see
Yeah.
what other lessons you've taken from the industry by that point.
Yeah, I would love that. We just moved a 150-year-old sharecropper's cabin.
Saw that. Yes, I saw that. That is so cool, so fascinating.
So we're gonna
Wow.
blend all kind of stuff up in there. Once we get the guests that are living in there out, and you know, we need to
The wild
spruce up a
guess.
little bit. I don't think it's been cleaned since probably the 30s. But we've got big plans for that little cabin. So yes,
Oh
you
yeah. Well,
definitely have to
I'm
follow up.
sure one thing that goes through your mind is the narratives you'll be able to tell while walking someone through the farm, and having that be such an interesting piece that, probably no one will think about, where that building came from, what its history
Hmm.
was or anything. And then
Hmm.
being able to tie that to the story of the farm and everything, that's, yeah, adds
Yeah,
so many layers to the energy of that farm. It's really cool.
exactly. Exactly. That's the goal.
Yeah, yeah, I dig it. Well, in the last few minutes here, I'm basically going to hand the platform over to you to let people know how to learn more about Green Heffa Farms, as well as I know you've got your own personal like social media presences and stuff too, if you want to share with people, and
Sure.
anything else, whatever's on your mind, and anything you want to plug. The podcast is yours.
Well, in November, vote for. No, I'm not gonna do that. Psych. Yeah. So if you would like to stay in touch with me, definitely we sign up for our newsletter at Green Heffa Farms. One Heffa, Heffa, the correct Southern spelling, and then a S
Oh yeah.
on farms because we're just getting started. So you can go to the website, you can find all of our socials. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, Green Heffa Farm. You can find me on Facebook, IG under Farmer C, and that's Farmer CEE, pharmacy, pharmacy. Get it, get it.
Ah,
It, I thought it would be just, and people are just like, oh, now I get it. Or you can find me on Twitter. I don't suggest you follow me on Twitter because I'm not going anywhere on there. But if you're just, really committed to keep up, you can find me on there under Clarenda Land. And I am pretty active on social media, so I love to engage. If you're interested in learning about our initial product, it is Brenda Balm's Tea, named in honor of my mother, Brenda. That's the Renda in my name. And that is a beautiful hemp flower holy basil blend, and it's USDA certified hemp. So it's just beautiful, beautiful hemp. So definitely check that out. We have some more teas coming out this summer, a few other things up under my sleeve. Oh, also, I just started a new series on Patreon called Sippin' Tea with C. And that's not necessarily about farming. That's about all the other stuff that I gotta
nice,
say.
nice.
So but all of the proceeds do support the farm. So would love to have some of your audience become part of the Green Heffa family. Our arms are always open, long as you're not coming with no bull. Come on.
Exactly. Yep.
Come on.
Well, that all sounds great. Everyone that's listening, go check them out. And if you want to learn more about Curious About Cannabis, you can find us at cacpodcast.com. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the usual suspects as well as YouTube. And we're also on Patreon as well, patreon.com/curious about cannabis, if you want to support the show. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you again next time. Thanks so much. Stay curious. Bye bye. If you want to learn more about cannabis, you can check out the Curious About Cannabis book, available now on Amazon.com and other online book retailers. The Curious About Cannabis podcast is presented by Natural Learning Enterprises, a science education company dedicated to the enhancement of public scientific literacy through education about the natural world. Curious About Cannabis is just one of several learning initiatives produced by Natural Learning Enterprises. To learn more, go to www.naturallearningenterprises.com or connect with NLE on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter.